So, fresh controversy has been brewing over the United States Agency for International Development, also known as USAID, and its potential or suspected role in the controversy that we've seen playing out in Bangladesh over the last 4 months. It's more specifically what we've heard about USAID and its potential role in the ouster of Sheikh Hasina's government in August 2024. Now, this is, as you know, something that many strategic analysts and experts in India have been talking about. Sometimes some have hinted at it, some have said it openly. India's ruling party, the Bharatiya Janata Party, has alleged that members of the deep state in the United States have somehow been responsible for the ouster of Sheikh Hasina's government and helped topple her administration and bring in the government of Muhammad Yunus. Now, what's happened is there has been a fresh development in this controversy where you have a series of documents and reports that have come out talking about how US agencies have used United States government's funds to back groups that have challenged the power of leaders like Sheikh Hasina, and how that might have in fact triggered the fall of her government. So let me start by laying into the controversy, understanding what exactly is being alleged about the activities of US government agencies, why they exactly are they being accused of regime change activities, and whether this is in fact credible. So let's start with more specifically what has been suggested. First of all, you've had a number of reports over the last couple of months saying that agencies in America, like for example, like the National Endowment for Democracy, as well as the International Republican Institute, that are of course US government funded agencies that spread, in the American view, American values of democracy, liberalism, and tolerance around the world. That is their mission statement, and they are active in dozens of countries around the world. In many cases, they work very closely with civil society organizations, pro-democracy activists, etc., in parts of the world where democracy is threatened, and they work to strengthen political parties and work with civil society organizations, cultural groups, marginalized communities, etc., to promote US values and to promote democratic institutions. Now, the allegations that came up really since September last year was that there were documents showing that agencies of the United States government, like the National Endowment for Democracy and the International Republican Institute, had run programs in Bangladesh that were specifically focused on providing funding to groups in Bangladesh that were pro-democracy groups, and that it was also maintaining ties with Bangladesh's political parties in the hopes of spurring a pro-democracy movements in Bangladesh after over the last couple of years a backsliding in Bangladesh regarding democratic processes and procedures. There was a sense that the 2024 Bangladesh election was rigged. That is something that is widely believed in Bangladesh, as well as the fact that over the last couple of election cycles, Bangladesh's politics have become less free and fair. That is the allegation that has been made against Sheikh Hasina's government, that several people in Bangladesh believe strongly as well. And because of those allegations against Sheikh Hasina's government, this is a ripe and fertile ground for agencies like the International Republican Institute, as well as the National Endowment for Democracy, to come out and talk about their role in spurring pro-democracy protests in Bangladesh. So that is what is, and I'm reading here from some of the documents. This is initially put out by the Sunday Guardian, where it basically said that these agencies were involved in putting out pieces of art and content, etc., that were giving a voice to marginalized communities, for example, people from plains communities, as well as youth, as well as women, and so on and so forth. These documents also cite very, very critical assessments of Sheikh Hasina's government and her party, the Awami League, and their impact on what has happened in terms of their role in Bangladesh, and talking about the kinds of steps that the Awami League had taken to restrict freedom of speech, restrict political space for opposition parties, and being very, very critical in these documents about the role of Sheikh Hasina's government, and therefore making a case that the International Republican Institute and the National Endowment for Democracy, these US government-funded institutions, should have a much more active role in promoting democracy in Bangladesh by working with these political groups. So they held dialogue conversations with youth groups as well as other groups. They funded pieces of art and activism by people from marginalized communities and so on and so forth. And at various points in these documents, of course, hinting that America should focus very strongly in terms of raising awareness on social and political issues in Bangladesh and supporting the public to challenge the status quo in Bangladesh. That is clearly quoted in some of these documents, that US government agencies should be interested in raising public awareness and of course attacking the status quo in Bangladesh, which is of course Sheikh Hasina's government. So that was the allegation that was made. Several $7 million were given to these programs throughout, starting in 2019 and then moving on into 2022. That was the allegation. And of course, like I said, these documents also contain reports where the Awami League and Sheikh Hasina's government is talked about in a very negative fashion. Also, India is mentioned in a negative context, saying that that the Awami League and Sheikh Hasina would try to seek re-election. This was, of course, referring to the 2024 general election. By all means, under the support of India, it is necessary to counterbalance interference from regional powers. That is what is being said in this report that has been again reported by another Indian organization. These are reports that the Sunday Guardian saw and therefore has been reporting. So I'm conveying what they are saying is in these reports. And of course, that of course has raised the hackles of a lot of people in India, that these reports are sort of suggesting that India is interfering in Bangladeshi politics, and of course also trying to prop up a dictator. That is again the view that is being peddled, and a view that at this point in time seems to be contributing to a great deal of anti-Indianism on the ground in Bangladesh. So that is where we are at this point in time. Remember that a lot of these theories and a lot of this view, this narrative, has also been given a great deal of a push by someone like, for example, by various agencies, as well as by Sheikh Hasina herself, who has come out and given statements saying that in fact it was the United States that helped topple her government because she refused to provide some military facilities to the US government. Now, it's very clear that Sheikh Hasina and the US government did not have the easiest or the warmest relationship. Regardless, the United States has disputed that characterization of what has happened. They have denied that this has happened. But again, what we have seen over the last couple of months is this sort of reporting that US government agencies were involved in trying to overthrow Sheikh Hasina. Now we come to the current controversy, which is that that more allegations have come out where Mike Benz, who is a controversial former State Department official, he was a Trump appointee, has claimed that the Biden administration and America's deep state, that's the phrase that is used a large amount of money to overthrow the government in Sheikh Hasina. And Elon Musk has also he retweeted those comments by Mike Benz and has said that yes, in fact, this may indeed be the case. And Mike Benz has basically said that the National Endowment for Democracy, the International Republican Institute, and the USAID, United States Agency for International Development, are all involved in financing efforts to overthrow Sheikh Hasina's government. So that is the allegation that has raised again the specter of US involvement in overthrowing the government of Sheikh Hasina. Now, the view is that the United States has funded LGBT groups, which is involved in which is of course included in these documents that we were telling you about, that the Sunday Guardian was reporting on, and that it also funded radical student activists to incite violent riots in Bangladesh. That is what Mike Benz is alleging. At this point in time, Mike Benz actually went into some detail about USAID, its activities in destabilizing the Bangladesh government, saying that really after the 2018 elections, these activities sort of ramped up, with the United States funding groups that would work on pro-democracy movements that would challenge the status quo in Bangladesh, and therefore this amounts to something like a regime change operation in Bangladesh. That's where we are, and it has again set the fires of controversy going in India about a potential US role in making something like this happen. Remember that this has not just been a view in the strategic community, but also even very sober analysts and even some in government seem to believe that this incident, that what has happened in Bangladesh, has contributed in some senses to an increase in tension and perhaps some distrust between India and the United States, because of course for India, Bangladesh is a top priority. It's a close neighbor, whereas for Washington, its policy towards Bangladesh may not be as central to its Indo-Pacific strategy. I've spoken to several journalists personally. I can tell you that who say that it's very hard to get Bangladesh to register on Washington's foreign policy radar, because they have China, they have Russia, they have the Middle East, they have India. They have so many big challenges and partners to deal with. Bangladesh really doesn't register. So the idea that, of course, that America would consider this a core national security interest is not very feasible. But for India, this is a core national security interest, what happens in Bangladesh, and because of that, there has been some dissonance between America as well as India. America has been willing to push the democracy and human rights line, has been willing to be critical of the Bangladesh government as well as Sheikh Hasina's government in the past. India pushed America very hard to not adopt such a hardline policy on Sheikh Hasina. Now, there is a lot of dispute about how open America was to India's overtures, which agencies particularly wanted to put pressure on Sheikh Hasina's government. There is reports that some parts of the US government were not interested in interfering in Bangladeshi politics, but this has kicked off into a big controversy. We actually also sat down, our executive editor Geeta Mohan sat down with a Bangladeshi journalist, of course, Salahuddin Shoaib Chowdhury. He is a counterterrorism expert, and he backed some of these allegations that have been made against USAID as well as its interference in Bangladesh politics. Just listen in.
31st of October, during the Diwali festival, Donald Trump tweeted about the genocide on Hindus, Christians, and religious minorities in Bangladesh. And in that tweet, he categorically mentioned that it is Biden and Kamala Harris who are responsible for pushing Bangladesh into a total chaos. Now, at that time, it was 31st of October, and now we are in February. Trump already is the president. So when we are hearing about the USAID playing the role of funders into this so-called regime change, color revolution, whatever, possibly we will also hear some more names very soon. For example, National Endowment for Democracy, NewsGuard, Wikipedia, and others. These are coming up. Actually, it is all interrelated. And these organizations, alongside George Soros and his Open Society Foundation and Soros, they all are a massive racket of targeting any particular country in the world. They also targeted your country, India, my country, Bangladesh. They have been so far successful in toppling a democratically elected government here, and finally establish a reign of terror. Now Bangladesh is practically under the control of Al Qaeda, Islamic State, Hamas, and other jihadist forces. So that was a very disturbing and alarming message for the American taxpayers, because their tax dollars were being used for such kind of the, I should say, terrorist agenda or jihadist agenda. And when even Biden administration, they were publicly talking against Al Qaeda, they were talking publicly against Islamic State, they were talking against Hamas, but on the other hand, they were funding the elements to empower those terrorist groups. So what was the, as a journalist, you also understand that main agenda of these forces were to destabilize the world. But particularly, what we say that countries in the global south, from Ukraine to Gaza, from Gaza to Afghanistan, from Afghanistan to Bangladesh.
Right.
And now, and now, this is, I mean, it's a serious matter, not a simple matter. I don't think that Donald Trump will only investigate the financial discrepancies or misuse of tax dollars. There will be also ultimate investigation of using of American funds for terrorist activities, because America is against terrorism, jihadism.
Right.
So
So that was a view from Dhaka, from a journalist who has, of course, a very critical view of USAID. Of course, we've laid out the allegations against the United States, USAID, as well as various other US funded organizations in Bangladesh. Of course, there is a counterpoint that is coming, and you'll hear it a lot from people who fund these agencies. That, of course, number one, engaging with, if you look at some of these activities, and in fact we can read them out to you. This is me providing you the counterpoint to some of the allegations that have been made. The International Republican Institute has worked with marginalized communities like Biharis, plainland ethnic groups, and LGBTI groups for improving their political voices. They funded pieces of art, more specifically. They have also given grants to musicians, artists, performers, creating 225 art products, as well as helping them develop policy demands for greater representation. So that is one part of the activities that they worked on. They, of course, also worked on another set of activities based on documentary screenings, roundtable meets, theatre performances, dance events, so on and so forth. And of course, yes, also engaging with political parties, also engaging with youth groups, and so on and so forth. Many people will tell you, and that is the view of people who believe in the counterpoint to this, that actually, yes, in fact, there was a push to push American values and democracy and human rights and all these values in an increasingly authoritarian country. But this is what the United States does in every country. To say, now you can have a principled objection to the United States, interfering in Bangladesh politics, and of course saying that they should adhere to these values, and we want to promote these values, and that is a fair viewpoint. But to say that therefore this translates into regime change operations is exaggerating the case a little bit. This is the kind of activity that USAID involves itself in countries all over the world, that American funded organizations involve themselves in all over the world. The Americans are very upfront about it. That does not amount to regime change. It simply amounts to people developing civil society organizations, political parties in such a way that they can challenge authoritarian governments and also fight for democracy. This is of course the American view, but not just the American views. Several people, even some Indian analysts, have talked about this and said that, look, are we exaggerating the case a little bit here? Is it really possible to overthrow a government with a couple $1 million of funding to one or two a couple of civil society organizations? Is this case a little bit overstated? They also point out that there was already a great deal of public anger against the Sheikh Hasina government. Remember that there have also been broader social and economic problems in Bangladesh for some time. Sheikh Hasina has been in office for a very, very long, was in office for a very long time. She was as Prime Minister for 15 years when she was finally overthrown. There was a slowing economy, rising social tension, rising youth unemployment as well, and of course, as has been pointed out, and that and this is, I think, there's something that we have to acknowledge frankly, that a number of international agencies and institutions have said that in fact there was an increasing sense that elections in Bangladesh were being rigged, that they were not necessarily free and fair. That is the view from a number of organizations, as well as is believed by the people of Bangladesh very widely itself. So the view, the counterpoint to all of the things that I've said in terms of the allegations against USAID are that, hey, she was already significantly unpopular. There were real social and economic issues. And yes, the United States government has funded some of these groups and organizations to support pro-democracy voices, but that's something we do everywhere, and that she fell because of other issues. And you can argue that USAID had a role, but to say that this was a substantial regime change operation does not really make a lot of sense. And there's been a lot of reporting coming in that looks into how the United States government has been approaching the issue of Bangladesh. And to be fair, it does seem like a very confused picture. It does, in fact, seem like people in the National Security Council and the White House were not as enthusiastic about putting pressure on Sheikh Hasina's government. The US Embassy in Bangladesh was, and there were significant divisions within the United States government about how the issue of Bangladesh should be dealt with. And so therefore to say that there was a organized conspiracy to take down Sheikh Hasina's government does not make sense. The problem, of course, for people advocating for this, and this has been pointed out in American media reports as well, is that, of course, the United States USAID has at times been accused of overstepping the mark, of getting involved in the domestic politics of local countries, of trying to carry out influence operations and so on and so forth. In fact, there was a great New York Times piece on USAID sort of talking about its activities in a number of foreign countries that was starting to resemble more covert operations than other things. Of course, USAID is and other agencies like it are instruments of US government influence. As someone once said, foreign aid and international development aid is 10% charity, 90% hard-headed foreign policy interest. So of course the United States has an interest in funding these organizations, having them go out and promote causes that will align more closely with American interests. America has been very clear that it wants to spread more democracies around the world because it believes those democracies will be more naturally aligned with the United States. That is the view. And of course the US, what's playing into this controversy, of course, is the past record of organizations like USAID as well as other institutions, and especially India's experience with a lot of these organizations, because you might remember that in the 60s and the 70s there were lots of reports coming out about the Central Intelligence Agency and how they were funding a number of front organizations in India that were trying to manipulate the media narrative in India one way or the other. And the Soviets were also doing that. There was a massive battle to control India's public opinion. So this very much plays into Indian fears as well as suspicions about what we know has happened in the past, what has been written and reported about, and what we fear has also happened in Bangladesh. So there is in the mind of some people a reasonable argument to be made that America was putting its thumb on the scales in Bangladesh through USAID, through other organizations, and had well-documented tensions with Sheikh Hasina's government, had a stated commitment to improving the state of democracy in Bangladesh, did of course fund organizations and civil society organizations with the express aim of strengthening them against the government of Sheikh Hasina's government. And of course now their past record for the last 60 years and their activities in countries like India have of course raised suspicions about what exactly they were doing there. There is of course a reasonable counter argument as well to say that these agencies don't go in for those sorts of covert operations anymore, and that funding a couple of $1 million here and there is not going to bring down a very powerful government that was in any case struggling with some other issues, social issues, rigged elections, as well as economic disturbances. This is a controversy that is going to continue to rage, and at this point in time, it does not seem like there is a satisfactory resolution. We will have to wait for more writing, more reporting on this to get into what Washington DC was thinking about in August 2024 when Sheikh Hasina's government was falling. That's all we have for you right now, but we will come back to you with more on this story as well as other stories. Thank you so much for watching India Today Global.